Hello, everybody. It's Dolly Girl 20 here. So today I'd like to discuss my opinion about generations from what I've experienced, what I grew up with, and how I feel, what I've learned from seeing things. So I didn't write anything down because I wanted it to come naturally and look like it's, because it is from my heart and look like it's from the heart. Because it is. So, when I was growing up, I was adopted by an older family. Um, I believe when I was adopted, my adopted mother was already pushing 70, and my adopted father, Charlie, who you all know that passed away as well, was in his 60s and then in his 70s as I got older. So when I was a little girl and I had some issues in school, you know, the teachers recommended therapy, and then they recommended some like an ADHD medication. Now my mom was okay with it because she was a little more open-minded when it came to certain things. And listening to teachers, and she had a messed up mindset too, how even if, the teacher's wrong, the teacher's always right. My mother would say it right to my face. Oh, the teacher's always right. I was always wrong in school, even when I was kind of picked on here and there. That's one thing I'll point out, number one, a lot of the older generation, they think that the elders are always right, even when they're wrong, even when they're not being fair. And I'll get more into it later. Now, my father, who was an older man, an old school man, did not believe in the therapy or the medication, whether it be psychiatric or for ADHD. That might be the same thing, but you get what I'm saying. I believe, in my opinion, from what I've experienced growing up with an older family, judgmental family, that the older generation is the reason why we have issues today. And I'm going to explain why. I'll give a few examples, or maybe at least one or two. For example, I see a lot of things on Facebook about how nowadays, and this is a good thing, how children have boundaries, and they should be treated with boundaries. Like, hey, I don't want to be hugged. I don't want to be kissed. I don't want to be hugged. I don't want to be touched. When I was growing up, I would have got laughed at if I was like, hey, my boundaries. If I knew what that word meant as a child, if I would have said my boundaries, I don't want to be hugged. I was forced to hug. I'm a huggy person. I don't mind being hugged. But if I didn't want to hug, I got to hug. And I feel like teaching children about boundaries nowadays is very important because, I don't like bringing this stuff up on my channel, but it does teach children how to be cautious of people who are people who don't mean well intentionally, like the bad people. Hey, don't touch me there. Don't touch me there. I'm going to tell my mom and dad. I believe that that's why so many people in the past have sexual trauma, because the older generation didn't take kids seriously. That's coming from my point of view, because if I said, hey, mommy, I don't like this person, and I never had that trauma growing up, but if I were to just say, hey, I don't like this person, I got shrugged off. Felicity, you're a kid. I told my mother, hey, mom, I'm sad. What about me? What about, she'd look at me and say, you're a kid. What do you got to be sad about? Like, I didn't have feelings. My adopted parents, I mean. And I noticed for the longest time I've been in therapy, and until now I'm finally getting the good therapy, because growing up from the early 2000s, which was more closer to the 90s, these psychologists and these therapists would they'd kind of kiss ass, like, excuse my language, but I'm going to say it, they kissed ass. Oh, your mother and father love you. You shouldn't get upset. You shouldn't. And let's say they said something that wasn't very nice. Now let me explain something. I tried to go off on my dad once, and a school therapist in my special ed school, my special needs school, would literally get mad because I got mad because my dad said when I first started writing, um, when, when I was writing a book, and my first book was actually called The Sewer. It's not out there anymore because the company went out of business that published it. But my dad looked at me and said, "Who's going to want to read a book that's called The Sewer?" Meanwhile, we got Stephen King that wrote a book called It. That's just one word. People loved it though. Not everybody, but people who do like horror loved it. My book was called The Sewer, my first book. And I also believe that a lot of these massacres that happen because of the older generation, because that's my opinion, because the older generation they don't believe in therapy and there are older people that believe in mental health, don't get me wrong. But a lot of them are like, therapy, psychiatry, that's for crazy people. It's stigmatized. And it's wrong. Then you have people, what was the other thing I was going to bring up? I want to make sure it all comes out making sense. I don't like a lot of the older men that say, boys shouldn't play with dolls. As long as you're not hurting nobody, why can't a boy play with dolls? Or men collect dolls, or men be a reborn dad. I've seen men who are reborn daddies, like the reborn dolls. As long as it's not like anything, inappropriate. I mean like being a daddy, or or playing pretend when you're little, a lot of the older fashioned men will look at those men and be like, oh, they're sissies, they're this, My biological grandfather, from my mom's side, I've talked about him before, we went somewhere one day, and he saw a little boy with fairy wings on. He was playing pretend. He got so upset. And why? First of all, it's not your kid. Second of all, it's not your grandkid. Third of all, he's not harming nobody. I don't like how the older generation will get so upset, and I've heard it from my adopted family too. Oh, this generation, I can't wait to be effing dead because this generation's screwed up. People walking around with blue hair and red hair, and what do you care? It's not you. That's fine. It's not you. But why do you care what other people do? As long as you're not harming anybody or doing illegal shit, why does it matter? I believe that the older generation is the reason why there's a lot of problems these days, and why there's a lot of people who have a lot of trauma from their past, and people who are not healthy, or people who, not mentally healthy, or people who are in therapy, because a lot of the older generation, you must respect your elders even though they're wrong and they're being assholes, You have to earn respect. I don't condone a child just being disrespectful to their parent. I don't condone that. But you also need to teach your kid respect by showing your kid respect. And my parents didn't always do that. Now, I loved my dad more than I loved my adopted mom. My adopted dad I loved more. But sometimes he wasn't always right either, and everybody makes mistakes. Everybody's got flaws. But, what I didn't get or what I didn't like when I was little, I wasn't allowed to say bad words, but people would say bad words to me. Oh, you son of a bitch. Oh, you little bastard, Why can't I swear? Oh, because I'm a child? Well, then you don't like it. You don't want kids swearing. Don't swear to them or at them. I just feel like the older generation, it's okay to have a different opinion. It's okay to have different beliefs. But when you start getting nasty is where there's a problem. Or violent, that's another problem too. I figured I'd make this video because it really has been on my mind a lot. And I did a lot of thinking about it. This is just my outview. This is my perspective. If you disagree, okay, fine. But I'm not saying everybody from the older generation is horrible. I've met nice people who are elderly. But there's certain people in the older generation that think they know it all. You know? So, and yeah, I'm sure a lot of elders will watch this video and be like, oh, another young person thinking she knows what she's talking about. Well, sometimes even when you're young, you know what you're talking about. Or you can have an opinion. So, that's just what I feel. And I'm going to end this video. I hope you guys have a nice morning, evening, day, or night, wherever you are. Bye.